the SQL on FHIR weekly meeting. So today we wanted to talk about planning for next year and the work streams. So this will be a little bit of a working session. That's what I had thought. Anything else from folks want to chat about before we get started on that? No? So yeah, I can tell you a little about the ASTP meeting I attended last week in DC. So I was talking to Dan about this yesterday. This is the annual conference for ONC, which is not now called ASTP ONC. So the Department of the Federal Government that regulates EHRs, HEFCA, basically interoperability. I think pretty much across the board, across many wings of the federal government. Obviously the leader of it is the national coordinator, who's Mickey now and will be somebody else in the future. We don't know. But so it was very good. It was, really well attended by a lot of people who are interested in our space, a lot of folks that we know. I think bottom line is, I chatted with a lot of people have heard about SQL on FHIR, or at least tangentially. Some people knew about it in more detail, but mostly it hasn't really spread and really become part of people's thinking and mindset. So that just indicates to me that, done a great job so far getting the awareness out and getting people to really engage and think about SQL on FHIR. So a lot more marketing, I think, next year. And then, our group will grow and, we'll be able to achieve more. So anybody's thoughts on that? You guys just care about the tech stuff, not the marketing stuff?
Yeah, for marketing stuff, so there's gonna be marathon HL7 Europe, and it's gonna be in Lisbon in February. You have one more chance. And I want to make a track for analytics on FHIR. If anybody want to join me, like in Lisbon, you're welcome.
What is Marathon HL7?
This is European guys. They doing, like last time it was in Athens. So once in a year they doing meetings. So they started last year. Yes, and it's like Connectathon, but I don't know. They do like European stuff, so they call themselves Marathon to distinguish from FHIR Connectathon. But it's like same folk, but from Europe. Yeah, so it was quite nice event last time in Athens. So kind of similar experience, like vibe, like Connectathon. They mostly focused on like Europe projects.
Yeah, I think definitely spreading the word at all levels, like the technical, folks who would come to a Connectathon, but also starting to move into, a world where we can spread the word to the business folks and those decision makers is something that I definitely want to focus on next year. I think there's some practical steps we can take. We can take some of that offline, but for instance, making some collateral that's easier to digest for folks based off of the work we did for the conference. So like I realized like I don't have a one pager for SQL on FHIR, just like a single sheet. And so I'd be explaining the whole thing from scratch to people, every person I met almost. So that's something easy we can do using the FHIR Analytics website and then taking that, conference page and, putting it to a sub page with links to the videos and things like that. Just a little bit easier to digest for folks because, I've been talking to a lot of folks and sending them links, but I don't have like nice collateral for that. And that's stuff we could share around. So just practical things like that. Anything else? Yeah, definitely want to get more interest from larger groups, payers. The person I was talking to mentioned a number of large payers here that could be interested and who have their FHIR and analytics departments working on SQL on FHIR like things already. So getting those folks aware of the work that's being done here, I think will be really key for the next steps.
If from a marketing point of view, I can do the report. So I was on a conference which call it like Health Data Forum. They call themselves like secondary data use guys, mostly researchers, universities, and hospitals. They were mostly on OMO before, but now I see there is a lot of interest to the FHIR, and I think that the SQL on FHIR and analytics on FHIR sounds for them very interesting. So I just talk and in between the sessions, and the next year we decided that we will do like FHIR camp side by side with this event with some intersection. So it's gonna happen in Web Summit time, so the middle of November. So guys, you're welcome. And this is interesting. I mean, like that, I think that we can even replace MOP in some use cases.
Yeah, definitely. So I think it's a good segue into work streams discussion, because that to me, sounds like a work stream. So let's just start off. I think we've all seen this. I think this document, let's just go through the top part. I want to use Ryan's time wisely as well. So let's just go through it quickly, use this as a working session. So articulate on the group's goals. So I think, Ryan, you brought that one up. How do we want to operationalize that?
Yeah, I'm not sure if that was a hand up to me or if there was like some existing content.
Everyone.
Yeah, I mean, maybe like brainstorming on like some of the major objectives. I think we floated some ideas. Maybe they were in the notes somewhere out there, but I mean, in terms of like advancing, I mean, there's obviously a number of distinct interest and area work streams. Yeah, I'm not sure what folks think we should prioritize or volunteers to kind of pick up and lead specific efforts here. But yeah, I didn't. Yeah, I wasn't super prepared.
I'm not putting you on the spot, Ryan. It's given the rest of the bullets on in this list, is there something missing in terms of goals? We want to do some work streams, but is there something that we feel needs discussion around, I would say, high level goals that is not articulated?
Maybe let's share the screen so for the report.
Okay. Yeah, I can do that.
So people can see this list. Can you?
Yeah, it's gotten more complicated for some reason.
It's getting to do any like cool stuff.
You have to read a lot to use Zoom now. So that's what I'm thinking. Like, is there, beyond what's listed here, do we feel like there's some kind of gap in terms of high level goals, or do we feel relatively comfortable about, going with some specific work streams? Or that's what I'm trying to hone in on.
I think this is a good start. One observation I would make is that I liked it when we had like a list of these big things that we were trying to achieve, and then we sort of organized sessions around specific topics and like to put out a poll, and everyone who was interested sort of expressed their interest in that, and then we put in a date to talk about that specifically. And I feel like that could be like a good model for the new year, and sort of organize the meetings kind of around specific topics and as needed, like for those topics, so that we're like really focused on what we're doing in each of those meetings, and we make sure that we get all the right people who are interested into each of the respective meetings.
As logistically, I think we all agree with that. And I think that's a model that we should continue here. Because I mean, it's been a little hand wavy in terms of organization the past few months, but getting back to that idea that there's a specific topic for the meeting and letting folks know in advance, making sure the right folks are there. Dan mentioned something about that as well. So just wanted to make sure that there wasn't something major that in terms of goals or broad direction that's missing here. What I'm hearing is probably no. So, and of course we can reopen this if needed, but
well, I think maybe one thing that is missing is like just general maintenance. So I guess there's kind of these new things that we want to add and all the rest of it. I think there's also some work to do to like clean up hub issues and just action smaller tasks associated with maintaining or fixing or doing sort of incremental improvements to the spec. So I'm not sure if we just do that sort of asynchronously, or I think we do need to get a little bit more organized with that as well, and probably go through the tickets at some point. But I think a lot of things can be done asynchronously, and maybe we just need to be a little bit more disciplined about how we do that, and maybe we need to go through the tickets and create Zoom threads for outstanding things or whatever.
Any thoughts on that from you guys?
I know that Zulip can be integrated with GitHub issues. I don't know. Maybe we can put this integration.
That's interesting.
So I think to me, that's like a particular work stream, ongoing work stream, general maintenance that we just sort of need to stay on top of. I'll get back to writing summaries as well. I kind of dropped off on that, and that, distinct tasking for people. So that's the main work stream. Obviously, we have to continue to maintain the spec as it is and the infrastructure behind the spec. So this is like work stream number 1, let's say. How does that sound to folks?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. The second work stream here, I'll just move on to the next one. So the second work stream here is what we're calling core spec development for milestone 2 or API. There's some ideas about roles and APIs for each roles. This seems like the meat of the development for milestone 2. So I think, this is going to be a significant work stream here. Any thoughts on this? And I think for each of these work streams, except maybe work stream number 1, this should have a, scheduled meeting time for it.
Yeah,
That's my
I
feeling.
think this is a decent topic that we could easily have a meeting about and talk through all the ins and outs of it.
Okay. Now I can't get back to my screen. Let's see. Can I? Sorry. Okay, now I'm back. All right. Nikolai sort of suggested taking charge of this, and this is definitely Dan very involved in this one too. So can I put you guys down as sort of the leads of this work stream, helping organize this one?
Yeah, sure. And like if you schedule meeting, this will help me to organize and prepare the stuff for the meeting if I know this is the topic.
I will be the administrative. I'll be the admin. You
Okay.
guys the lead.
Yeah, I wonder if they just want to schedule a couple different meetings with different API topics, because I think, yeah, I mean, maybe we just pick a couple dates and pick different APIs that we want to do at each date, so we could have a meeting about, I mean, and maybe if we can do more than one, we can see. Yeah, I think there's a lot of different API use cases, and I think breaking them out might be helpful in terms of like having a more structured discussion.
Yeah, that was my suggestion, like SDC guys did. So they split into roles, and every role do support like set of APIs. And if you're talking about like runner, it may have like repository. Repository is quite straightforward, yes. So they just a CRUD and search stuff. But if you go to validator and runner, so that there could be like extra API for that.
Yeah, and I guess I would even lump in the next topic as relationship to bulk FHIR into like an export API of some kind rather than as a separate topic. I think it's part of the API question, because I could see like the same API you're using for a runner or similar API for a runner in terms of like how you reference view definitions, maybe by canonical URL and or reference, and then kind of running them and either exporting in a format or running them so that they create tables. But we can talk about that a little bit, but I don't know that it's a totally separate topic. It feels like we want to have like a cohesive API strategy.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I mean, we broke it out this way, but I think they're so intimately linked that it could certainly just be one. It's probably better to have fewer work streams. Anyway, so I will
decide if we're lumpers or splitters. I feel like those are the two archetypes.
I think that's context specific, let's say. We can be splitters for now. Well, I guess lumpers in this case. Splitters and then lumpers. So this is the core work, development work. Any other thoughts on this before we move forward? And then I will put together like a calendar that will be shared, or at least like a spreadsheet, and so you can see which dates, maybe just simple polling, in a spreadsheet, and people can check off when they're available, that during this time period, this conversation will be happening. Then he'll be able to plan it in advance. Let's go with that and see if that doesn't work necessarily for the right folks to be involved. Then we can go forward and maybe have ad hoc meetings at a different time. Does that sound good to people?
Yeah. For the core work, I would love to discuss like query resource, because I still think that it's a missing part. Maybe brainstorm it.
So I split that down all the way into the parking lot down here.
But because if we decide on query resource, it's going to be the part of the core.
I think there's two things there maybe. So one is Nikolai talking about like a layer on top of the flattened tables. And I think that's a good topic. And then I also think the other thing we've kind of talked about a couple times is like packaging. So, and that would maybe include some query resources, but certainly like packaging a set of view definitions together in some way so that, there's like a semantic relationship between them.
Was that part of the IG publisher integration? The scope of the IG publisher, like that we have listed there, is like I know Graham had done some work which was distinct from that, but I wasn't sure. But I totally agree. Packaging needs to be a key item on the list, and if it's not part of the IG publisher item, then we should have one that it is part of.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, I didn't realize that was part of that. But I think it's even broader because, like, ideally, I'd be able to like create an ad hoc package without having to publish an ID that I could reference for my work.
But in FHIR there are two stuff. So there are like two things. You can publish IG, and you can publish package. Yes, so you can publish package without publishing IG. So that's my work.
Then there's three things. There's like the package, the IG, and then maybe like a bundle format that's literally just a way to collect the resources. So
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to define package might be a bad term because it's probably too overloaded at this point. But
Let's call it FHIR package because FHIR package is not overloaded. So it is like concrete.
and maybe we don't need all of those, but like
Right.
certainly talking through all of them.
So is it worth having a separate bullet item for artifact bundling, artifact packaging distinct from the IG publisher?
I think so. I mean, that's my lean. But before we move on, I guess I'm a splitter because I was also thinking, query resource, like as an individual type of resource, like as this kind of atomic unit. Are people's head in that space as well? So like the query resource could just float around on its own, sort of unpackaged, not in an ID, not bundled to anything. That's the first element I was thinking of, right? Like it's pure minimum, right? Like a resource that says like, okay, this is a SQL query in this dialect. Here's its ID.
That seems distinct to me. Cause like, I mean, these other items I think are like packaging up stuff that we already have fairly well defined and well understood, and we can package it in ways that are already well defined and understood. So yeah, so I mean, honestly, and I don't think I've been plugged into the query resource discussion as much. So maybe it's just like a lack of familiarity from my perspective, but it does seem like a distinct item.
What I just described is probably as much discussion as we've had, so you're not missing anything. But maybe I'm just trying to think of in practical terms how we make this, meetings around this. Let's say, I mean, we would need to define a little bit distinct. Whoops, I just cut and did not.
Yeah, we can call this topic like publishing, and then we can discuss different options like integration with IG publisher, probably fish and sushi, stuff like authoring and publishing. So let's call it authoring and publishing, something like this.
That sounds fine to me. We can break it down to some work streams from there. So we'll group and then split. So we'll get both the archetypes one.
But for query resource, I think it's a separate topic. I would love to have a like brainstorm and decide we really want to go that way, like and introduce additional query resource. It's a completely separate topic. But if we decide it may be quite interesting. Like
so you're suggesting a separate work stream.
For the query resource, or at least like one or couple of meetings to decide are we gonna do query resource like or not. Because I think that we're quite close, because for the flat representation we can use like ASCII SQL. There's a bunch of translators to dialects. And if format is flat, so probably like we can distribute ANSI SQL queries, just packaging them as a resource and like link them to the view definitions.
I got to run. This seems like a good structure to me, but yeah, those sound like a great topic. So let you guys continue. All right, see you later.
Yeah, I'll keep you informed. I'm putting that conversation like not higher priority, but like maybe earlier than the rest of the packaging, by the way. So because it'll be related. I think they're a little bit orthogonal, but it might make sense to discuss that a little bit more detail before talking about packaging.
On the query resource side, though, I think I'd also like to, this is maybe too much complexity, but I'd like to loop in with the OMOP discussion, because I think ideally that would inform both like what capabilities we want to do, as well as be a little bit of a stress test for maybe one of them. I guess not an analytics stress test necessarily, but certainly a like transformation stress test. So maybe if we had an analytics use case we were thinking about and an OMOP conversion use case we were thinking about, like that might help inform kind of how we want to structure the query resource. I don't want to get too much into this discussion here. I think we can talk about that and focus, but I don't know if that makes sense to you, Nikolai. I guess I'm a little wary of like not having specific use cases when we talk about kind of the resource design.
Yeah, I agree. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it should be, it should be reflective of some use cases as well. I think of data quality use cases in particular as well, or
some kind of report. Maybe then you worked on a quality panel, like some quality request which just checks that quality.
Is a great use case for like thinking about aggregates and analytics, and then there's maybe a data transformation use case of kind of
we can try to make some simple measures which it just counts, like implement them through the query resource.
And if we want to get really, really tough, we could pick like a CMS quality measure or something.
Yeah, that's I would love to try a few of them. So because I was working on translating SQL like manually to SQL, and it works. And like while the manual translation, I think we can pick some.
Yeah, the hard part is always finding metrics that you can measures that you can actually calculate in US CDI. They all need like a lot of them need data elements that aren't present in FHIR or aren't populated in FHIR. But like if you like, we can find a couple that do have that would be pretty fun. And then data quality use cases are also those are easy to translate into SQL use cases too.
I think, I mean, those use cases, at least that set feels like enough to get started and then move forward from there. So, but I'm going to make them distinct work streams because yeah, they're a little bit orthogonal. But I think that feels pretty good to me in terms of breaking those up and then, you know, defining specific meanings around them. Change these. This is working for people.
Yep.
Okay. All right, great. I'll lock it in by italicizing things. All right. Authoring, publishing.
I would probably add like fish integration because it's an authoring tool and it's close to IG integration, but I don't know, can we like write ViewDefinition in a fish syntax, because for now people doing IGs and fish, so they probably will want to do the ViewDefinition in fish as well.
Yeah, maybe we could bring in some, you know, folks who know about simplifier.
Maybe.
Possibly. This is kind of part and parcel. So authoring and publishing, we do need to explore what's.
Yeah, I keep in mind that, yes, I would love to see this special tab for profiles, because I see that like many ViewDefinition gonna be profile specific, and having extra tab with the ViewDefinitions for profile sounds interesting. I don't know, Graham started like doing a lot of stuff, and
we should also like adopt it ourselves in our idea.
Yeah,
that we can be the first user. Yeah.
Let's not get ahead of ourselves, John. Yeah, I did try and install that infrastructure a couple of months ago. It was a lot. Okay, so work stream 1, 2, 3, 4. It feels pretty good to folks, I think. And then, okay, so this one, FHIR standard. I think we've gone back and forth on this quite a lot. I think the consensus is, and you know, if you don't show up to the meetings, you don't get a vote, I guess, at this one. Just hold off, let people know in the FHIR working group what's going on, but this isn't where we're going to put a lot of our emphasis. You know, if somebody makes a strong pushback on this, then we can bring it back. So I'm just going to make a decision there and cut it out for now.
What about the FHIR community process piece?
Yeah, you mean FHIR Foundation?
It's a different stuff. Yeah,
it's FHIR Foundation.
It's probably the part of FHIR Foundation. I don't know. Yeah.
So
whatever
this is definitely work stream. You're like,
yeah.
John is like.
But so forgetting about what it's called, it's more like, you know, the way we treat published specifications and all that sort of stuff, which is, you know, it's kind of just like the basic level of sort of documentation about how we do our work so that people understand that and can participate and can know how to interact with the specifications that we produce and that sort of thing.
Yep. I think we should continue to move forward with the FHIR Foundation and that documentation and the light formalization of how we work together and that kind of thing that John mentioned. So that was,
yeah, but
I consider that
like FHIR community process. So this is like kind of specification. I will send the link here, and this is different keyword than FHIR Foundation. So I sent.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very confused about, but yeah, like Graham sort of talked again at the FHIR camp about the FHIR community process, and basically like
he did.
It seems like exactly what we're talking about, you know, like light formalization, and it's just basically like a README for the group, which is, I think, all we need. And that there was also some talk about, you know, the problem of, you know, R6 and beyond, and where does the new stuff get built, and do we have sort of an ecosystem of specs that kind of work together, and there's a level of sort of trust in that sort of family of specs, and can we do things like build resources in not the core spec and all these sorts of things. So there was a bit of talk about that, which is kind of the same issue that we're talking about, right?
I'm not sure, John, because all right, here's what I know about the state of play before FHIR camp, right? We went down the FHIR community process road and then got blocked there. And because we're not a formalized organization, that makes it complicated for HL7 to do official kind of relationships. So we went to the FHIR Foundation process. Nikolai and I had a couple of months ago with Graham about this. That seemed like the most promising to me as far as I know in terms of what I've heard so far. So in my mind, it was like go FHIR Foundation, very similar to what we would need for a FHIR community process, but it would be under the FHIR Foundation's nonprofit structure, very lightweight, very Apache-like. So it would kind of give us the, what's the word, sort of, umbrella that we were looking for, but no more, and be pretty lightweight. So that's as far as I knew. And I was like, okay, that sounds like green light to go. And then did Graham kind of backtrack on that at FHIR camp, or like
No,
It's not
no.
backtrack. I think it's the same stuff, because we are not talking about HL7 process, but FHIR community process. I think that's like the same idea which Graham just developed like further, because like they just call it FHIR community process. And probably all projects under FHIR Foundation should follow the FHIR community process. And
Yeah.
maybe Graham just invented this term like months ago. I don't know, because he just first time I heard it on the FHIR camp. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I think it's a good thing to basically fill the requirements of the community process anyway, which is just
Yeah.
like sort of a readme for the group, basically, like this is how things work. And I think we've already kind of done most of this.
yeah.
I think we just put it into a prominent position and move on. But make sure that, so whatever, so we've got a core group, people know what that means, and we've got sort of a set of guidelines that we try to stick to, and everybody agrees on that, and we put it in a document and move on.
I agree with that. The only thing I'm not hesitant about is that process was blocked with the official FHIR community process. This is the document that we put together, at least draft document. You should see that on the screen. And we wouldn't get, or we're blocked in getting the kind of official going forward with this process in HL7. So we can continue to do essentially the same thing, I agree, and be under, this is what's so confusing, is that this also says FHIR community process, but FHIR.org, FHIR Foundation, is not that. I mean, they're definitely distinct. So for that reason, like we can't do it in, channel A because, we're not an organizational entity, etc. We should be able to do it in FHIR.org Foundation. I think we're in general agreement here. Like what we provide should be essentially the same, but it's under a slightly different organizational umbrella. If that's, nobody has any objections to that, because the other road seems to be just blocked. So how about I take this on, because this is like, or at least I lead it, and then keep folks up to date. That's my understanding right now. I can get with Graham again and try to hash out what the next steps are. I just don't want us to spin constantly on this. It just seems like a little bit of a distraction. So how about I just take that on and we formalize it as a work stream, but when there's more for the group, like I will bring it to the group rather than like we just have an endless discussion about these things. Not anything you did was wrong, but you know what I mean? Like we just kind of spin on it.
Yeah, probably we need one more meeting with Graham, I think, to understand all this stuff, because it's like a moving thing.
Moving target. And then I'll try and lock him down. John?
Yeah, maybe the way to sort of circuit break it is to forget about the externalities and just agree that there's some value in creating something just for the purposes of the functioning of the group, right? So like it's really just formalizing, not too much, but just a little bit, how we do things and how the group is comprised, just so that whatever we create has some certainty around it. And if the group shifts around, or if there is like disagreement about things or whatever, there's kind of a framework there. Not a really heavy thing, but just a basic sort of understanding, and it's the understanding that we already have as a group, but because we've been working together for so long, it's just kind of in our heads. So it's just basically putting it on paper.
Let's do this. But this is probably what FHIR Foundation should provide us, like that's what I agree.
Let me take this on,
Yeah.
and I'll drive this forward. But I think what you said makes sense, John. Let's get our ducks in a row organizationally, internally, and then we'll work on that external part. That sound good to folks? Okay, perfect. Next up is use cases. I know we only have 10 minutes. Sorry, we started late. Might have to continue. Yeah, how do we want to handle these specific use cases where there's a lot of interest in terms of making them into work streams? John, you have Mimic. Go ahead, John.
So I think the previous sort of work streams all need to, like as a prerequisite, be weaved in with a use case each. Like, and taking like a philosophy of what we've done before, we shouldn't just be inventing stuff in isolation. We should have an implementation of something going in parallel to those things, and preferably something that is rooted in reality. So I feel like, so if you scroll back up again for a sec, so for example, if we were to progress this authoring and publishing thing, I feel like in parallel to that, we should actually be going through the motions of doing a proof of principle of how a thing can be published. So maybe we pick something that either aligns with projects that somebody's doing, or that we think would be like a good value drop in its own right. And we actually do that as part of working out how we do it, if that makes sense. So US core is like maybe a little bit big as a first sort of thing to tackle, or maybe you could certainly sort of pick a subset of that, or pick a sub sort of use case. But when you sort of talk about target use cases, it kind of struck me that maybe these should actually be weaved in and attached to like a subject area.
Yeah, do you guys have thoughts about that?
I like FHIR to OMOP project because I see a lot of interest in it, and it can be proved by the group of like people who are really interested in such type of. We can try to make it as a real project, like took like DBT and I don't know, and the view runners, and try to implement it and see what will happen, how close we can get.
Yeah, I agree. I like the OMA project because it's very concrete in terms of inputs and outputs. I agree with John on the US core, where I think it's more a collection of use cases. Like if you actually flatten the entire US core, I think you'd get like pretty unworkable tables just because of the number of fields and how many of them are going to repeat in a nested way. And so I think I don't have some great examples off the top of my head. I think you could do data quality assessments on US core. You could do patient contact information that would extract unnesting from patients with a hierarchy of kind of addresses and phone numbers to use. Like I could see you could do something that would trend quantitative.
There are some simple cases like go to observation profiles and build these tables like blood pressure and all the stuff. So they look quite obvious.
Yeah, but like doing every type of observation, yeah, I think you could create some kind of narrower use cases out of US core. But I think if you try to come up with quantitative lab results, I want a table of like patient addresses, but only the most relevant address for each patient that I would actually use to contact them. Like that kind of stuff where you create your use cases within US core. And so we could define some of those. I think those might be fun, but I guess trying to flatten all of US core seems like kind of flattening all of FHIR, which just like leads to kind of unworkable SQL tables.
But can we like make together, keep in mind what John is doing with Mimic? Can we do like FHIR to OMOP with Mimic and make it a project?
So I already did a Mimic demonstration on all of your behalf. I just haven't shared it with you yet because it's still going through internal review, but I did the Mimic thing as part of the paper. So I'd love you to have a look at that in the coming weeks and tell me what you think, which is like reproduction of a research paper using Mimic. There's a FHIR to OMOP project that I can bring to do actual FHIR to OMOP and generalized FHIR to OMOP, so I can participate in that as well. On the quality measure side of things, I actually did something very similar to this as well, except with Ucore that you might be interested in. Maybe I can just share my screen for 1 sec.
So John, you implemented transformation of Mimic from FHIR to a MOP, like, or...
No, not Mimic from FHIR, not Mimic OMOP. So I did transformation of Mimic on FHIR to a set of views for the reproduction of a research paper. And Mimic also has like this layer called Mimic derived that is effectively like a value add set of views over the top. We could create in FHIR land using SQL and FHIR to fit that same purpose. But I am aware that there are things around Mimic and OMOP as well. So that could be something to drive our transformation through when we create it.
Yeah, that sounds very practical. So try to translate Mimic to original Mimic format, yes, and try to translate Mimic from FHIR to a MOP. If you already done like Mimic and FHIR, it's a very interesting project, I think.
Yeah, I mean, John has touched all of these already. Amazing. What I'm trying to think of just organizationally is back to your point, John, about having our development work be informed by these use cases, but also these use cases are broad enough, big enough, complex enough to necessitate their own work streams as well. I mean, like meetings and people and organization. So that's what I'm trying to solve in my head a little bit, or at least get a handle on.
I think they more sounds like a project, which may require meetings, may not, maybe just coding, sitting in the...
Well, I think they're a project, but I'm trying to think about deliverable here and kind of the external communication component here. So meaning, some of the organizational stuff for us, but also how we exhibit, right? How we demonstrate and what the deliverables are for external uses. Like that.
Could it be like open source project with like ViewDefinition, some test cases? Did you open source this stuff, or it's a closed source project?
Yes, it'll all be open sourced.
Okay, so we may work together on it.
Yeah, but I feel like we don't have to necessarily. I think when we do something within SQL and FHIR, we just want something to run alongside it that's kind of an implementation of it, that's validating the decisions that we're making along the way. So we're not just inventing something, we're actually saying, oh, we invented something and look here, we've actually proved that it works on something real. So it's kind of like recruiting projects to sort of run alongside and interact with the spec development process to kind of validate it as it happens.
Yeah, exactly. That's what in my head as well.
Yeah, I would describe that as like implementation grounded, like standards work, right? Like it's not necessarily driven by the implementation, but it just almost seems like a principle to me rather than, you know what I mean? Like rather than something formal where, you're working on, or we are working on, packaging or IGs. Now I can't get back to my screen weirdly here. Oh, there we go.
I'll stop sharing. I just wanted to show you. Yeah, I just wanted to show you that we've also done a bit of that quality measure stuff. So that's also totally possible, and it's pretty simple as well. In fact, I think I did open source that example, so I can share a link to that as well.
I'm not sure there's a specific sort of rule we need to construct here for these work streams necessarily. I'm at least on the fence with that. But I do feel like something like FHIR to OMOP is broad enough to me to be work stream. And then since we're pretty much all the same group of people, as we develop some of the more standards work streams, they'll interact together. That's where my head is at in terms of organization.
Yeah, in my head. I'm really curious. I don't know, John. So this is very interesting. What are you doing with the Mimic and all this translation? So, but you don't want to share it with the group, or you want to do it like with your forces, or you may like open source this project, and so we can join it and make it like.
So the Mimic stuff I did as part of the paper, which you guys are all co-authors of, and we'll have an attached open source thing to it. I just haven't sent it to you yet because I have to get it through internal review. These FHIR to OMOP stuff, we're doing a project on FHIR to OMOP, which we could use to help validate anything that we do in that space. So we've got a funded project on our side that we're developing a SQL on FHIR based FHIR to OMOP thing. And it would be great if we could sort of use the working group to sort of, come up with ideas about that alongside when we're doing it in the project, and that can just sort of enhance the whole thing.
But that project is gonna be closed or open? So
it will be open in the sense that we want to build a tool, right? So yes, the data is closed and we're working on an actual hospital and primary care data sets and running this transformation through them. But one of the side products of the project should be something that we can open source, as in a tool or a set of tools to do FHIR to OMOP conversion. And I want that to be as general as possible. Yeah, I think the important part of it is open.
but because if you can like okay, so you're gonna do this project, but if you can open it at the early days, and we can split in two parts, like implementation and the like view definition part, and we may have like some test data, not real data, but like test data.
Yeah.
So the group may help you working on the view definitions and like discussing this stuff. That would be great. So that's what I'm talking about.
Yep. No, I think we can do that.
Like having close to real world track, like if you can split this project into the closed and open part, and we can do together the open part, and especially working on the FHIR to OMOP as a SQL on FHIR project. Yes, so you may like this view definitions can be done outside the tooling part. Yes, probably like sub repository just connected to your tooling.
Yeah, and I'm totally open to where that should live. Like, so if we want to have a common repository in Fireland and just develop it there, that's totally fine. Otherwise, we can host it. But yeah, we want it to be an open source thing that we collaborate with others on.
Okay, I mean, I think this has the most weight around it, and I think most interest around it, at least just given demand. I mean, you have a funded project, John. So the way I'm thinking about it is, this is a work stream. It's the implementation work stream, right? Or implementation type work stream. And let's put a little organization around it, right? Like scheduled meetings, right people in the room, flow and inform the standards development work, right? Let's just have that kind of happen naturally, so we have at least a place to start, in my view, and then based on the experience, adjust as necessary.
So I think that the next step is to kind of work out when would be a good time to first meet about these things, and then sort of gauge like how frequently to meet for these things. Because I don't know about you guys, but I like to be on top of things. I also like to prepare for meetings, and I'm kind of a bit overcommitted. And so I think like we can't just sort of progress all these things every week. In my view, like they kind of need to have, perhaps each have their own sort of cadence, and it needs to fit with who have we got to work on it, and let's make it the frequency so that we can be making meaningful progress at each meeting, because otherwise it's kind of demoralizing if you the meeting's up, I haven't done anything. Yeah, that's just my observation on the organizing part.
Yeah, certainly. I think a couple of thoughts, like John, you've got your fingers in so many of these. We don't overload you, number one. So, let us know, right, what your capacity is for this, for these various work streams. So, I mean, that's something that I can ask, but, everybody will have to kind of let me know. And then set up a schedule of cadence on some of these things that allows folks, right, the time and space, right? So, maybe what I'll do, I think, is I'll set up a schedule and propose the topic, maybe the next quarter, right? and then folks can sort of take a look at it, see if it feels appropriate, kind of weaving in these work streams into at least the weekly meeting, right, as a starting point, and then get feedback on it and say like, okay, well, this seems like too much, or maybe we should weave in some of the some of the more generic work streams where more people can be involved potentially, and go from there. Like, start with that artifact, get people's sense of, does this feel like the right cadence for folks, and then make adjustments. I'm just trying to think how this could work practically, John.
Yeah, maybe the weekly meeting is kind of like an organizing thread, and then there's like work streams, and the work streams should be like about doing stuff. So like if you have a meeting, it's kind of to sync up, and then there should basically be a bunch of kind of actions or planned work that you go off, and then you should be able to sort of forecast like how, like when to meet again based on when you're going to have time to do that sort of thing. So like I feel like each of those work streams will kind of naturally kind of set their own cadence based on the people who are doing the stuff and talking about doing it, and when should we meet up again and all that sort of stuff. So maybe the first step is to kind of just have a kickoff of each of these things, like sort of put polls out for kickoffs of these things, and we can just talk about how we want to do each of them.
That makes sense to me. Is it, what's your feeling with both of you guys about ad hoc meetings outside of the weekly?
Maybe they should be ad hoc organized. So maybe let's don't complicate the things. Just I think if we will be transparent about like stuff we want to share with the working group, so just put it, and like if anybody interested, so that these meetings can be organized. So that
Totally
So
fair.
like I think we're kind of towards the top of what people can commit, right? Like if we were to sort of fan this out and ask for more and more commitment, I think I don't know if we would be able to get more commitment from people. So we have a slot. So we've got 52 meetings a year, right? That we can use for all sorts of different things. I think we should just use that to start off with. And if we need more, like if we say, this isn't happening fast enough or whatever, then we can go from there. But I feel like we should just reuse this slot for now and go from there.
Yeah, and the additional, anything additional ad hoc would be agreed upon, right, by the folks involved. It's not, not forcing anybody to come, right? And I'm just trying to get your sense of if you guys are against it, right? Because just fundamentally, or it's an option, right, if necessary. And this would be driven by the work stream itself. It's not top down for me or anything.
I think natural. I don't know. So whenever people need this extra meeting, just again with a group, so that's enough. I think just if two people want to meet and discuss something and they okay to make it open, just send it to Zulip and say that, guys, if you're interested, join us. So that's enough, like enough organization for such type of meetings.
Yeah, it's just on my head, just so I have some structure. Yep.
Sorry, I'm gonna have to go, guys. I have to.
No problem.
Okay, so we'll just, before we go there, so is this going to be the last meeting for this year?
Let's see next week if somebody ready. So let's coordinate on Zulip.
Yeah, let's sort of what we've talked about and finalize what sort of the next meetings are on Zulip. Okay.
Yeah, I think possibly next week, or I can put out a poll even for folks, because a lot of people. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, John.
Bye.
See you. All right.
Let me stop recording.
Yeah, go ahead.